How do you kill them?
By just strangling.
Huh?
Strangling.
Huh?
Strangling.
In July of 2021, as the world was still grappling with the COVID-19 pandemic, Kenyan families sat glued to their televisions as the evening news flashed across their screens. Phillip Onyancha, the self-proclaimed vampire who brutally murdered 19 innocent people and sucked their blood, had just been acquitted and found not guilty on one of those murders. This was a man who had previously calmly told reporters that his dream was to slaughter 100 people. A monster who had personally guided police officers to his victims' rotting corpses. Yet, somehow, he had just beaten the system on this case. How does that even happen? Welcome back to the Crime Gist. My name is Damisa. Today, we are diving into one of Kenya's most disturbing cases. But first, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell. You don't want to miss out on any of our true crime deep dives. Phillip Onyancha's story begins in Kericho County, where he was born into a large family. His dad worked at Kapkwen Tea Estate, and by all accounts, Phillip Onyancha was the golden child. According to his parents, he was smart, promising, and destined for success. His own mother admitted that she treated him differently because he was the brightest of all her kids. But here is where things get dark. Phillip Onyancha later talked openly about his childhood. He talked of being essayed by his nanny as a kid. And guys, this isn't just some throwaway detail. This trauma is what is believed to have shaped everything that came after. The abuse he faced rewired his brain. It twisted his understanding of love, trust, and human connection. He later described how this tainted his view of the world and especially his relationship with women. He was incredibly shy growing up, craving acceptance from girls, but never knowing how to get it properly. The abuse had left him angry, confused, and it planted the seeds of rage and violence that would later consume him entirely. After his primary school education, Phillip Onyancha joined Kenyatta High School, popularly known as Kenyatta Mahiga in Nyeri. In Kenyatta Mahiga, he seemed to be thriving. His natural intelligence and leadership skills were so impressive that the school made him games captain while he was in Form 2. This was huge because this was an honor typically reserved for senior or final year students. Teachers praised him and classmates looked up to him. He was the golden boy who could do no wrong. But sometimes, monsters are excellent at wearing masks. In Form 3, rumors began circulating about Phillip Onyancha. A fellow student accused him of SA. The school launched an investigation, but when they couldn't find solid proof, they swept it under the rug. Looking back now and knowing what Phillip would later become, that accusation wasn't just random. It was a warning sign that everyone missed. During his time at Kenyatta Mahiga, something else happened that Phillip would later talk about. A female teacher befriended him, and the two formed an unusual friendship. She started inviting him to her house in the staff quarters. Phillip described feeling a strange, otherworldly pull to her home. He'd find himself walking there in the dead of the night, as if something invisible was dragging him through the darkness. Then came the visions. Phillip claimed that he had the gift of clairvoyance. He was seeing things before they happened. He became convinced that his teacher was practicing witchcraft and had somehow cursed him. Whether you believe in that stuff or not, one thing was clear. Something had changed in Phillip during this time. Something that would turn him into a monster. Remarkably, he graduated high school successfully in the year 1998. But in a move that nobody understood, he never bothered to go back and collect his certificate. After high school, Phillip Onyancha seemed to get his life together. He landed a job with a security company in Nairobi. He also married a woman named Lydia Nyaboke, and the two had a son in 2008. To everyone around him, he looked like a normal guy building a normal life. Then came the night that changed everything. Philip described feeling that same compulsion that he felt at his teacher's house, but this time it was different and more sinister. On a whim, he got into a public transport vehicle and traveled 2 hours to the town of Nyeri. He didn't tell anyone where he was going. He just went. And once he got there, he stalked and killed his first victim. The details of his first murder are still not so clear, but this wasn't a crime of passion or a moment of madness. It was a calculated, cold-blooded murder in a town far from home where he thought he'd never get caught. And you know what he did after? He traveled back to Nairobi, went to work the next day, and acted like nothing happened. That level of detachment, the ability to take a life and then casually return to normal routine, marked Philip as something far more dangerous than a typical criminal. He was a predator who felt nothing, zero remorse and zero empathy. Phillip Onyancha's second victim is where we really see his twisted mind at work. While walking through Nairobi, he spotted a woman approaching from a distance. Later, he would claim that some supernatural voices told him that she was lost and would ask for directions. Sure enough, the woman stopped him, explained that she was lost, and asked for help. Philip offered to guide her to where she was going, but instead, he led her to an isolated area along Riverside Drive, strangled her with his bare hands, and threw her body into a pit latrine like garbage. Later, Philip would find work as a security guard at the Nairobi Water and Sewerage Company in Karen. At this job, he found his next victim. He befriended a woman who lived in the servant quarters behind the offices. For weeks, he cultivated this relationship. He was charming, helpful, and trustworthy. The woman saw him as a friend and maybe even a protector. Then, one day, he lured her into a secluded location, killed her, and according to his later confession, sucked blood from her neck. The scary thing is, his co-workers and neighbors just thought that he was a quiet guy who occasionally did weird things. He'd play loud music late into the night or randomly turn off the main power breaker to the neighborhood, but people just shrugged it off as quirky behavior. Nobody suspected they were living next to or working with a serial killer. In November 2008, Katherine Chelagat, a 32-year-old mother of one, went missing. Her family later received ransom demands. They scraped together all the money they could find, praying that it would bring their daughter home alive. But Phillip Onyancha had already killed her. Her decomposing remains were discovered 2 years later in a sewer drain in Karen at the Nairobi Water and Sewerage Company where Philip worked. He later described how he simply shook her hand and she trustingly followed him to her death. He was insinuating that he had some type of power that made all these women follow him.
How did you use to capture your victims?
Just confess her and supernatural powers. She just heeds to what you're telling her.
In June of 2009, 9-year-old Samuel Wanyonyi vanished from Nairobi. And just like Katherine Chelagat, his family received ransom demands. First, for 40,000 Kenyan shillings, then a reduced demand for 10,000 Kenyan shillings, or approximately $100. Being that they were not a well-off family, they couldn't raise the money in time, and Samuel disappeared forever. Here is the part that will chill you to the bone. Phillip Onyancha joined the search party that had been organized to look for Samuel. He comforted the grieving parents, analyzed the ransom note that they had received, and even suggested that the handwriting looked very feminine. Of course, this was meant to throw off any suspicion. Phillip Onyancha was helping search for a child he had murdered. By the year 2010, Onyancha had become incredibly bold. He wasn't just killing people, he was taunting everyone by showing up at crime scenes. That same year, a series of murders would rock the town of Thika. In January 2010, after murdering a 25-year-old sex worker known as Helen Nyambura in a Thika motel, Phillip Onyancha actually went to the scene and watched as police officers loaded her body for transport to the mortuary. Imagine that, the killer standing in the crowd, watching his own handiwork being discovered. But he didn't just visit once. He kept coming back, developing what he called an obsession with the crime scene. He later claimed he did this because he would dissociate during the actual murders and needed to return to process what he had done. The following month, February 2010, he killed another sex worker known as Jacqueline Wamboi at a cheap motel called Suitable Lodging House. She was found naked with a broken neck. And this information would make sense later because it wasn't just the killings that made him famous. He later claimed that his greatest pleasure came from sucking his victims' blood from their necks. It was from this that Phillip earned his vampire nickname.
What happens to the blood?
You suck. You just suck the blood.
In March 2010, Onyancha lost his security job because he had stopped showing up regularly. Without legitimate income, he turned kidnapping for ransom into his primary source of money, though he had already proven that he never intended to return his victims alive, even if the families paid the ransoms. The following month, April 2010, another 9-year-old known as Anthony Muirore disappeared from Dagoretti. This time, the family managed to pay the ransom quickly, hoping to get their boy back safely. But Phillip, as usual, had no intention of keeping his word. 2 months later, in early June, Anthony Muirore's decomposing body was found in Lenana Forest, and the smell was so bad that anyone who came near the scene was overwhelmed. Can you even imagine the family's heartbreak? They had paid everything they had, believing that they were saving their child, only to discover that he had already been killed. The police immediately took up this matter. Investigators started with phone records and on the money transferred to the kidnapper. By tracing the phone number used in the kidnapping communications, the police finally caught Phillip Onyancha on June 5, 2010. Instead of fighting the charges, Phillip Onyancha wanted to confess to everything. He even considered calling a morning radio show to admit his crimes publicly. At the police station, he sat down with officers and began what can only be described as a detailed confession tour. Later, he led police to crime scenes across Rift Valley, central Kenya, and Nairobi, to marshes, bushes, and swamps, pointing out exactly where he had buried his victims. With each body they found, he seemed to get lighter and more relaxed. It was like he was finally relieved to tell the truth about what he had done. Kenyans watched in horror as this ordinary-looking man led police to body after body, explaining exactly how each person died. It was like watching a real-life horror film unfold on the evening news. Phillip Onyancha's confessions were incredibly detailed and matter-of-fact. He calmly explained how he had killed 19 people, mostly women and children, and how his original plan was to kill 100 people. He showed no remorse and no emotion while he explained this. The vampire was finally confessing, and it looked like justice would finally be served. In his confessions filed in court, Onyancha told police investigators that he used to be possessed by spirits whenever he met the women he was accused of killing. These supernatural forces, he claimed, took control of his body during the murders, which explained why he would dissociate and couldn't remember the details clearly. When pressed further for more details, he went ahead to explain how his high school teacher, known as Elizabeth Wamboi, had initiated him into a cult while he was in Form 2. He said that on one of those late-night visits to her house, Elizabeth had cut his chest and drank his blood. From then on, he had felt an unstoppable urge to kill. According to him, The cult had given him a mission to murder 100 people. He said he targeted women because it was a woman who had initiated him into the darkness. Based on these accusations, Elizabeth Wambui was arrested and her trial began. But when Philip took the witness stand, he did something unexpected. He denied all his previous claims about the teacher. Without his testimony, the case against Elizabeth collapsed and she was released. That same year, 2010, he was found guilty of another offense separate from the murders. He was sentenced to 10 years in prison when he was found guilty of SA. He continued serving this sentence while still on trial for the murders. Behind bars, however, something appeared to change in Philip. He became a bookkeeper and started preaching, claiming that he wanted to turn his life around. In 2015, he publicly apologized to the families of his victims, saying that he had been living in darkness then, but had now seen the light. On July 8, 2021, Justice Jessie Lesit delivered a verdict that stunned Kenyans. She acquitted Phillip Onyancha on the charge of murdering one Jacqueline Chepngetich on May 30, 2008. Her reasoning was that the evidence presented before her fell far below the required standard of proof beyond reasonable doubt. She said that even though she had no doubt that Jacqueline was murdered, she found no evidence that conclusively pointed to the accused. The judge absolutely destroyed the prosecution's case, calling the investigation inadequate and full of disappointing omissions. Police had failed to investigate basic evidence, including whether a phone line used by the victim was connected to Philip in any way. So, despite believing that the victim was murdered, the judge couldn't legally convict Philip because the police work was so incompetent and shoddy. But get this, that acquittal was only for one case. Philip still has other murder charges pending at the High Court, plus a case of attempted murder and SA pending before a Kibera court. So, despite the 2021 shocking headlines of his acquittal, he remains in prison today and will likely spend the rest of his life there. So, what do you make of Phillip Onyancha's story? Do you believe that he was genuinely possessed by evil spirits as he claimed, or was he just a calculated killer? We may never fully understand what created this monster. What we do know is that somewhere out there, families lost their loved ones because of his callous actions. Thanks for watching. As usual, please don't forget to subscribe, to like, and to share this episode with other true crime junkies like yourself. Until next time, stay safe.